and gentlemen, my name is Maria Janela May Inisahon, your facilitator for today. But before anything else, let us welcome the following guests. We have the GM food manufacturer, scientist, the consumer, the environmentalist, farmer, and of course, our religious leader. First of all, the discussion is all about GMO. What is GMO? A GMO or genetically modified organism is a plant, animal, microorganism, or other organism whose genetic makeup has been modified in a laboratory using genetic engineering or transgenic. However, GMO has its own pros and cons. And without further ado, let's start the discussion by hearing out from Ms. Juliana Benaventura, our consumer. Miss Juliana, what do you think about GM food production? Proceed.
Thank you very much, Ms. Misaon. So, representing the consumer side, although GMO has a lot of advantages, it also causes disadvantages that can possibly risk the health of us, the consumers. That is why consumers deserve to know if their food contains any GMOs because of the suspicions that they can cause allergies and illnesses. We feel that GM foods are unnatural, immoral, and unsafe, which is quite ironic, sadly, since 70% of processed foods in the United States already contains GMO. Moving forward, numerous studies as well as billions of millions dollar sales demonstrate that we prefer all natural foods to their processed counterparts. We do believe that natural foods are free of artificial ingredients, pesticides, and GMOs. Yet, federal regulations attest to nothing of the sort, allowing food producers to use the word natural as long as there's no artificial or synthetic ingredients have been added to that food. Another bad news is that GM foods may have a link to some human diseases. Example, Morgellons disease, an illness that creates a sensation of bugs crawling underneath the skin, allergies, stomach bleeding, or even deformities. That is why we consumers disagree on the idea of what GMO wants to achieve. We think that in that way only the manufacturer sales can increase, but considering that our health can be at risk by further promoting it, makes us think otherwise. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Miss Juliana. Now let's have our GM food manufacturer, Mr. Ken Gagneron. What's your outlook about GM food production?
As a GMO food manufacturer, our primary focus is to improve farming productivity. Most GMO crops available today were created to be resistant to specific pests, pesticides, and diseases, or difficult environmental conditions such as flood or drought. If crops are genetically modified for pest resistance, farmers can reduce their reliance on insecticides so that local fauna such as birds, rodents, and insects can flourish in the area. GM crops can help improve food sustainability, enhance environmental farming methods, and produce more food that is nutritious. GMOs can actually help manufacturers and farmers due to increase of profit. Farmers using GMO seeds in their crops that can help steadily provide nutritious and safe food for their families and sell more in order to buy more GMO seeds from us, and the cycle repeats, which causes more money for the farmer's business and our business as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ken Viganaron. Now let's have our environmentalist, Mr. K.M. Mancilia. Mr. K.M., please proceed.
As an environmentalist, a major environmental concern that was discovered associated with GM crops is their potential to create new weeds through outcrossing with wild relatives or simply by persisting in the wild themselves. The potential for this to happen is assessed prior to introduction and is monitored after the crop is planted as well. A study in 1990 demonstrated that there is no increased risk of invasiveness or persistence in wild habitats for GM crops when compared to their unmodified counterparts. However, the research stated that these results do not mean that genetic modifications would not increase feediness or invasiveness of crop plants, but they do indicate that productive crops are unlikely to survive for long outside cultivation. It is therefore important, however, as regulations require, to evaluate individual GM crops on a case-by-case basis, both prior to release and after commercialization.
Thank you. Now let us hear the side of a farmer which is represented by Miss Althea Riley Arzada. Miss Althea, please proceed.
Yes, thank you for inviting me in this forum. And as a representative of farmers, we believe that GMO crops that are tolerant to herbicides help us farmers control weeds without damaging the crops. When farmers use these herbicide-tolerant crops, they do not need to till the soil, which we normally do to get rid of the weeds. This no-till planting helps to use maintain soil health and lower fuel and labor use. GMO seeds are expensive and farmers must buy them each year or else liable for patent infringement. And while contamination can happen through no fault of our own, farmers have been sued for seed piracy when unauthorized GMO crops shows up in our field. Patents makes independent research on GMOs very difficult for us. And here are some bad side effects that can happen to us farmers and to other people who uses GMO crops for their field. First is we would make plants that leave unwanted residual effects to remain in the soil for a long period of time. The process of growing GMOs includes the addition of new genetic material into a crop's gene. And similar to bacterial genetic engineering, in agricultural ecology, this means the introduction of new genes in crops like corn. Experimental cultivation of these crops started in the US and Canada in the 1980s and became large scale and commercial in the mid 1990s. Now, research on the effects of large scale growing of GMOs has revealed various concerns on ecosystems with GMO strains, which are believed to have potential to alter agriculture. Particularly, GM plants had left unwanted or residual effects remaining in the soil for extended period of time after they were removed, alerting agricultural regulators. Data show that despite the absence of genetically modified plants, their strain persisted for up to 6 years. They can pose a threat to insects that are important to our ecosystem. GMO crops are said to be dangerous to some insects, as their genes could be deadly to them. This is definitely a serious issue when it comes to certain insects that are useful to the ecosystem, such as butterflies, and are not actually dangerous to our crops. They can produce more weeds and can threaten the lives of animals. Engineered plants are found to function as mediators to transfer of genes to wild plants and creation of weeds. To keep under control, scientists are inventing new herbicides that were not necessary for non-GMO weeds and are toxic to various animals that feed on GMO crops, such as cows. Tests have shown to uptake these herbicides having toxic consequences on certain organisms and the ecosystem in general. They threaten crop diversity. Those who oppose the creation of GMOs push their argument with regards to the effect of these products on genetic diversity. They say that these genes from GM crops can spread to organic farm crops, threatening the diversity in agriculture. If it does happen, that crop diversity decreases. This will have a serious impact on the population dynamics of other organisms and the entire ecosystem. While the chance of the strain of genetically modified crop could pollinate an already existing non-GM crop is unpredictable and unlikely, as there are certain conditions to be met for cross-pollination to occur. A large-scale pollination has ability to release a GM strain during pollination, thus increasing the risk. As a result of this crops pollination to non-GM plants, hybrid strains are created, which means there is a new greater chance of ecological novelty to occur. New artificial strains will be introduced into the ecosystem that can potentially decrease the level of biodiversity to completion. And lastly, they are believed to change the field of agriculture in a negative way. Research on the effects of growing GM crops on a large scale has sparked various concerns, especially those regarding ecosystems with GMO strains, according to scientists. These strains have the way of potential to change agriculture in a negative way. GMOs are undeniably an excellent means when we want to save the budget of our everyday food. And even though we have bad sides with GMO, here are some good effects that can happen to farmers and as well as other people who uses GMO for our fields. They offer more useful knowledge for genetics. The mapping of GMO genetic material has increased knowledge about genetic alterations and paved the way for enhancement of genes in the crops that make them more beneficial in terms of production and human consumption. For instance, crops can be engineered to resist unfavorable temperatures or produce higher yields, thus providing a greater level of genetic diversity in regions where climate hinders productivity. They allow more profit. GMOs have become a very efficient means for farmers to make larger profit, as it allows them to spend less time on their resources. It's also economically efficient in a way that these organisms are designed to be pest resistant, eliminating the use of pesticides, which means more saving. They add more value to the crops. Another great reason to grow GMO crops is that these plants will get added nutritional value, especially among those that previously lacked the necessary vitamins and minerals, as there are regions around the world that heavily rely on rice or corn. Plant genes can be added to such crops to boost their natural value, which is particularly helpful in malnourishment populations and because GMOs are able to resist pests and other plants diseases, crop yields will be increased without the farmers having to use pesticides. They are known to decrease the price of food. Advanced crops and higher yields certainly means lower cost, which are benefits that can pass the consumers in the form of cheaper food products. This will be very helpful to families who cannot afford to buy supplies after everyday consumption. This also means that starvation will be prevented. And lastly, they yield products that are found to be safe. After precise testing and evaluation of GMOs and other related products, they are found to be safe for human consumption. In fact, studies show that they are even more safer compared to traditional crops. Thank you very much.
Wow! Now, let us proceed to hearing out the scientist. Miss Marjorie Barceliano, please proceed.
Thank you, Miss Facilitator. For me, as a scientist, GMO is highly recommended for us to use because of its quick and easy process to breed animals as well as plants. This could help us to enhance our studies regarding organisms and to discover more of their species. Based on the contributions of genetic modification in agriculture in the past decades, we could see the improvement of the scientists in their discoveries until they start to develop the genetic engineering in 1970s. They make similar changes in a more specific way and also in a shorter period of time. This process was invented to lessen the wasted times that we consume when doing some experiments that relates to genes cloning. Until this time, many scientists like me are still working on this process because we assume that this could really help us in discovering new living organisms as well as new treatments and medicines. Thank you.
Thank you. And last but not the least, let us now hear from our religious leader, Mr. Simon Cruz. Mr. Simon, please proceed.
Me, personally, as a religious leader, we are against the GMO products. The Catholic Bishops' Conference of the Philippines exert a strong influence in policy making, and the CBCP has not supported biotechnology and probably will not until there is an official endorsement from the Pope. President Arroyo's visit to Rome on September 27, 2003, she apparently consulted Pope John Paul II about the church position on biotechnology, On the basis of that meeting, she issued a statement indicating that she felt it was important that opponents of GMOs knew that according to the Vatican, GMOs are not immoral. The CBCP issued a statement in response stating that the Pope had not endorsed GMOs. In 2009, Bishop Vicente Navarro of the Diocese of Bacolod here in the Philippines issued a pastoral letter calling on the Negros Occidental and Bacolod city governments to continue banning the entry of GMO products. And why are we going to alter God's work, right?
Yes. Thank you so much for sharing your outlook on GMO foods. Now, moving on to our next session, speakers. The first question is, are GMO considered safe for human consumption? Let us start by hearing out the answer from our religious leader again, Mr. Simon.
To answer your question, I observe that there is extreme hunger in impoverished areas around the globe. But also, I am concerned about long-term impacts about genetically modified organisms that cannot be quantified yet, and until it is proven to cause harm, we find it permissible to eat and grow genetically modified crops.
Thank you.
Based on what I've seen from my experiments and also from some of my research, I think GMOs are safe for human consumption because, first of all, it uses less pesticides, which means it has less chemicals. And also, it provides improvement on its nutrition and enhance its food quality.
Yes, we believe that there is no evidence that a crop is dangerous to eat just because it is GM. There could be risks associated with a specific new gene introduced, which is why each crop with a new characteristic introduced by GM is subject to close scrutiny. FDA regulates most human and animal food, including GMO foods. In doing so, FDA makes sure that foods that are GMOs or GMO ingredients meet the same strict safety that are same as all standard foods. FDA sets enforcement food of safety standards that those who produce, process, store, ship, or even sell food must follow, no matter how the food are created. Thank you.
Yes, I agree. Before any food produced using gene technology is permitted to the market, a variety of tests have to be completed. The results from these tests, including a result from animal feeding trials, are considered by the authorities responsible for determining the safety of each new GM product.
Questions of safety are often answered by a way of comparison like traveling in an airplane is safer than driving in a car. When it comes to genetically modified foods, the comparison to non-GM foods is not only illustrative of safety, but a key part of determining it. No food, GM or non-GM, is absolutely safe. However, it is very close to the universal conclusion of every expert who has evaluated it that the GM crops we have at the moment are as safe to consume as the standard crops we have been consuming for years.
So my opinion in the question is yes, it is, but the safety of consuming GMOs doesn't give us 100% reassurance because in fact allergies in children have doubled since GM foods were introduced in the 90s. So I think it's too risky.
Thank you so much, speakers. Now let's have the next question. Are you going to support GM food production? Why or why not? Let's start by hearing out the answer from our consumer, Ms. Juliana Buenaventura. Please proceed.
As for me, no, because of the risk it has against the consumer's health, which is our number one priority. And what if there are more effects that people are yet to discover? How will we take it all back to natural when GMO keeps spreading around the world? Lastly, this GMO really solves our problem to world hunger. Thank you.
As a GMO food manufacturer, I support GMO production. GM crops help improve food sustainability, enhance environmental farming methods, and produce more food that is nutritious. Genetically modified has the potential to solve many of the world's hunger and malnutrition problems, and to help protect and preserve the environment by increasing yield and reducing reliance upon chemical pesticides and herbicides. So I think that GMO should be a good solution for the world's increasing problem.
I support GMO because they tend to be less expensive and may contain more nutrients. GMO foods go through many trials before being permitted on the market.
For us farmers, yes, we agree. Crops do not damage the environment simply because they are GM. Some farming practices, such as overuse of herbicides, resulting in the excessive eradication of wild plants from farmland plots, have been shown to harm the environment. These problems are similar for non-GM and GM crops. In a large farm-scale evaluation of herbicides-tolerant GM crops conducted in the UK between 1999 and 2006, it was shown that when weed control is particularly effective, insect biodiversity is reduced. It did not matter whether or not the crop was GM. The important factor was the damage of weeds remained in the crop. Damage to wildlife can be reduced if a small amount of agricultural land is set aside for biodiversity. A related issue is the growing problem of weeds becoming resistant to herbicides. Due to the overuse of the herbicides, herbicide-tolerant crops, whether GM or non-GM, can cause this problem because repeated growth of the same herbicide-tolerant crops involve repeated use of herbicides. One solution is the rotation of crops resistant to different herbicides or rotation of herbicides used with the use of other weed control strategies. Thank you.
For me, yes, I'm going to support GMO because it doesn't require things that can harm our environment. Additionally, it helps plant to breed quickly so that we can provide enough crops. Thank you.
It depends because given this attitude of pragmatism, the chances are high that GMOs can be accepted, especially if you can say that this is for the greater good and safe for the environment. Judaism, like Islam, also believes that if GMOs are made in a way that does not affect health or the environment, then there is no need to ban them. The debate also revolves around the question if GM foods are kosher, and the notion that genes pleasing goes against the natural order God has created.
Alright, ladies and gentlemen, finally we have come to the end part of our discussion. We would like to say thank you to our speakers for the informative yet very interesting talk, and most especially to our audience for your active participation. Hopefully, the discussion will be beneficial for everybody. Again, thank you for your attention, and I hope you learned something from us. God bless!
Once again, I'm Juliana Di Benaventura as a consumer.
I am a GMO manufacturer and can't please vegan it on.
And I am Gamer Darby Armancili as the environmentalist.
I am the farmer, Althea Riley S.R. Saga.
I am the scientist, Marjorie Barciliano.
I am Simon Carl S. Cruz as the religious leader.
Bye!
Bye bye, bye bye.
Bye.
We hope you
Thank
have
you
a
for
good night.
watching.
Thank you for listening.